Welcome to SkillUp Academy. In today's training session, Dennis will show us his 5 best tips on how to hacks or tips to learn the language in a better way. And I love learning languages. I personally speak 2.5 languages. So I speak French as my first language, English is my second language, and I lived in Spain and Colombia, so I learned quite a bit of Spanish as well. So every time I travel to a new country, I try to learn at least a few words, including like hello. And it used to be that I learned, fun fact here, it used to be that I learned no onion in every single language because I couldn't eat onions before. So I learned that in Korean, in Thailand, in Thai, in Cambodian. I learned that in Chinese, and it was just the word that I learned. But so, Dennis, your turn. This way.
So my background is in foreign languages. So I learned French at university, and then I learned Spanish and Italian through language hacking. So I'm sharing some insights based off of my experience of going through the traditional route of learning French academically, and then going more the language hacking communication route into Spanish and Italian. So these are 5 of the key tips that I learned that helped me to approach Spanish and Italian as a communication tool, which meant that I could speak it quicker and I focused more on practical stuff and it was less overwhelming for me. So I think the key thing for languages is to make it simple as possible, because it's the overwhelm that can kind of catch you in that limbo of never speaking the language. So my tips are centered around that today. So the first one is about making it simple. So like when I learned Spanish and Italian, I had the hindsight of learning French. So from French, I realized that the verbs I used day to day were the past, future, the present, and the imperfect. I realized that any more than that was like more at an advanced level. So when I came to learning Spanish and Italian, I started with learning the present tense. I would use the present tense to describe the past tense. The reasoning behind that was that it got me over the perfection, this tendency to get things perfect. So the key thing for languages is to let go of your kind of need for perfection to begin with, so you get in more practice, and then over time you can perfect the language as you go based on deliberate practice. So I just realized the present tense, you can describe the future quite accurately as well. So in French, you can say je vais aller, or you can say j'irai, or Maggie's then. So I just realized that why not just learn the infinitive of the verb and the present tense, so I can describe the future, I can describe the present, and I can describe the past just a bit, not accurately, but I'll get my message across as like a communication tool. So that's
could you say like the present and say in the past after?
What's that?
I do this in the past. Like, could you just like say in the present and just use words that signify the past?
Yeah, I do this yesterday, or yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah. So it doesn't sound perfect, but you're getting your message across, which is like shifting your mindset from it being about a subject that you need to get like perfect grades in to more of like a communication tool where you're focusing on what's the message I want to get across to this person here. So getting into speaking practice. So with language hacking, my approach was communication. So I forgot about, like, I didn't focus on the reading or the writing aspect of things, even though I went on and did translation afterwards in Spanish. But I focused on, to begin with, I wanted communication because I knew that's where I'd build my confidence that I'm an actual speaker of the language. And then from that, it'd become more easier to just write and read Spanish and as well after that.
It is about the confidence, right? Especially the speaking part, and that helps you speaking in the present to actually gain more confidence in all the languages that you learn.
Yeah, because like you're making quick progress. Because like when I learned French, I had this mindset of I need to reach a certain arbitrary standard before I would allow myself to speak French. Whereas with Spanish and Italian, I flipped it and I said, if I can start, because I read about this in language hacking, the speaking from day one concept, and I couldn't wrap my head around this, but I said I'd give it a go. And so what I realized from doing that was that I got in more practice and I didn't have this like big overwhelm of speaking the language in a few months' time. So when I was learning French, I spent 5 years probably learning it in school. I went to France the first time and I couldn't speak a word because I just didn't have the muscle memory developed, even though I knew a lot of French at the time and I was passing my exams and stuff, but I just couldn't speak. So that's that's why I wanted to flip on its head and give a different way of looking at language as I go. I didn't want that frustration again of all those years of putting in work.
For sure. Do you always have to immerse yourself in the place? So how do you practice Spanish if you're in England, for example?
So I was actually in France when I learned Spanish and Italian. So there was a teacher in the school who taught Spanish. He was a French guy, and I knew he talked about football, and so I would. So this gets me onto the second point, actually, getting comfortable not knowing anything. So I was interested in football at the time, so I would watch interviews of like Cristiano Ronaldo interviews. So the reason behind that was that I knew Cristiano Ronaldo from him speaking English, the type of guy he is, the type of words he uses and stuff. So that gave me a reference point for the type of words that might come up. The other thing with football interviews is that they're very limited in what they can say. So they're going to say football, they're going to say things like team, performance, happy. They can't say an awful lot more beyond these things. So I would watch very short clips of him, like 2 to 3 minutes long in Spanish. I would not understand anything for the first week or 2 weeks. Then I'd start learning words like football, team, offside, those types of words that could come up in an interview. And then after a few weeks, you start like noticing, oh, that's that word. And the other great thing about that is that you're already at the deep end. So you're not going from like beginner, intermediate, advanced with materials that might not be that engaging. I was actually enjoying watching it. I was getting comfortable not knowing, and I was already at the stage where I wanted to get to. So that was very encouraging for me. The other thing that helps you with is that you start focusing on the meaning rather than the specific words. So from learning French, I realized my biggest problem was whenever I'd be speaking to people and I wouldn't understand 1 or 2 words, it would throw me off for a while in the conversation. And so I would lose the context, I'd lose the meaning, and I would get flustered. Whereas with Spanish and Italian, I realized that if you focus more on the sense of meaning and forget about like if you miss a few words here and there, you actually just in your body you feel a lot looser. You feel there's more flow, and that comes into your conversation more as well. Like you're not up in your head as much. So that's
how do you make that happen? How do you allow yourself to just
practice? It comes back to the sitting down, having the discipline to look at the video even for 2 or 3 minutes, not understanding anything. And over time, after a while, you're like, okay, I guess I'm sitting down, I'm going to watch this and not understand anything again. It's just over time through practice and like just doing it, I found for myself that like I was able to shift more towards being okay not knowing everything, and then picking out like what are the key words here so I can start trying to make some sort of sense of what's being said here, and then come up with questions that I could ask somebody. So another thing I used was instant messaging. So when I started off, there was like a platform called Shared Talk. So I would go on there, I would have Google Translate in one tab, I'd have the conversation in another tab. The beauty of it is that you're talking to real people, but the same kind of patterns will come up in an introduction. So you'd be like, how are you? Where are you from in the world? What's your family? That type of stuff. So the thing is, you're not going to have the same conversation. You're not going to have the exact same conversation every time, which means that it's more real world. But at the same time, you're developing the pattern, the muscle memory in your mind of like a conversation with a real person. So again, that meant I didn't need to be in Spain or Italy to have the pattern of the language in my head.
And that was all spoken?
No, like actually you can do it spoken as well, but this is instant messaging. So like so for me, it was like I was getting the pattern of the conversation through instant messaging. And then I was watching YouTube videos of native speakers. So I was picking up like just the way the sound and stuff of things. And then I was speaking to the Spanish teacher in the school. I didn't get to speak Italian, but I found with Italian that the pronunciation wasn't as difficult for me as Spanish.
Why is that?
So that's kind of how I worked it around. And that was like very, very I made it very simple as well. So I wouldn't learn synonyms. I'd learn that one word that would get me speaking. So like for synonyms, I just forget if you can say something fancier in other words. I would just, for now, I go, what's the one word that will get me communicating? And then again, as you get better, you learn the synonyms. So I started realizing that my French is better because I knew more synonyms, because I'd like that it fleshes out your language, your level increases, but at the same time, you can communicate quite well with not knowing all the synonyms to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen that a lot. I used to host on Couchsurfing, and the people coming to Canada didn't necessarily speak really good English, but they could communicate with me through exactly that, a set of little words that they could use, and using the present tense as well. And they were able to have conversations with me. We were able to have a good time. It's just a matter of allowing yourself to make these mistakes and not having the greatest vocabulary.
And then you get more motivation because you're talking to real people. That's when I started getting good at French. It was like I made some French friends in university. And that's when I saw the motivation. I was like, okay, I can actually converse with people more. And it's like, I can actually speak to somebody now who I wouldn't be able to speak to otherwise if I didn't learn French. So like, they were the real reasons that kind of drove me to like really focus and get better at French.
Yeah, it's so motivating.
Yeah, exactly. We move on to the third one. So the 80-20 principle. So that helped me a lot when I came across it, because I realized that, I guess when I came across it, 80-20 was saying that, okay, look for the 20% of things that will get you 80% of the output. So I was looking back, again, I was looking back in French, so I did that for reference. I was like, what is the 20% of things that will get me 80% of the output? That's when I came up with the past, or the 4 tenses in that order. And the other thing was vocabulary. So I was like, instead of like, I'll give an example of animals. So like, instead of like learning all the animals like we do in school, we try and learn a lot of different animals before we use them. I just learned cat and dog because most people will have either a cat or a dog. And then the other beauty of that is that when you do meet a person who's got a hamster or they got sheep or whatever, you get to learn it in context, or else you'll watch it in a video or something. Like, it's better to have some sort of visual association, or ideally some experiential association, so that the word you'll retain it better. So yeah, 80-20 helped open my mind to the fact that you can accelerate a language, you can learn it quicker. So I came across word usage frequency articles then that pointed to learn about 3,000 of the most important words, and you can get to about 70% conversational fluency. About that or something, yeah, and about spoken conversation. So I used that principle I was like, what's the general kind of conversation words and verbs that come up? So with verbs, it's always like to be, to have, to want. Like, you go to country, you're going to say these types of verbs. So I started ranking verbs according to how often I use them in French. And then with the more specific more specific language, I started thinking more about, what do I speak about? What am I interested in? So I'd learn words around that, because what's the point of learning words for like makeup or jewelry if I'm not going to be using them? So I'd learn words about football, or I'd learn words about whatever I was interested in at the time. So then you've got your general vocabulary you can focus on, like just general everyday language you're going to use, and then have 1 or 2 specific areas that of your interest. So football or whatever it is. So that narrows down the scope a lot compared to trying to learn all topics at once.
Yeah, completely. I like to think that I learned my English through playing video games. So the most of my vocabulary when I started was about castles and swords and shields. And I wouldn't say castle because I wouldn't know how to pronounce them. It was just written words back then. So I would say castle or a knight and things like that. But at least I could read, right?
Exactly.
Like swords and magics and spells and all that kind of stuff. So that was how I actually got started learning English. So it does work because I was interested in learning these words. I wanted to know what I was actually doing in these games and what they were talking about. So it was really motivating for sure to start from that.
Yeah, that's good. That's a very good point. Yeah, it's what you're interested in. If you're interested in it, you'll want to learn the words, like,
Yeah.
The next
One
part
thing
then,
is I do look at the top 100 words in language.
Yeah.
So when I am serious into learning language, because these top 100 probably come at least, it's not the 80-20, but it probably comes at least 50% of the time in all the articles. It's just that they're really boring words, like a, the, to. They're really boring words, but they put the glue together at times.
No, that's what I did actually, the 100 common words. And another thing is the loan words. So I would learn, so for example, learning French, I would see what are the words in English that look pretty much the same. There'll be a different pronunciation or different variation, but like that gives you 100 words for very minimal effort. So
yeah, totally. When I don't know a word in Spanish, I actually use the French word and put a Spanish twist to it, and 50% of the time I'm actually right.
It's better than nothing. Like, yeah, that's it. And you learn from that. Yeah. The next part then is like the growth mindset. So I learned from languages, a lot of it's psychology. It's like understanding yourself better so that you can like express yourself better and you're not limiting yourself. So with the growth mindset, I found that if you become more conscious of the questions you're asking yourself rather than trying to learn all the material, just kind of be conscious of what questions you're asking yourself. And then as well, so for example, you go to like a conversational meetup. Like I'd recommend that for anybody, no matter how uncomfortable it feels to you, going to a room of like people you might know. It's a great way to learn. And from that experience too, you'll start seeing more your self-talk as well. So like if you didn't go to plan, what's your tendency? Like what sort of questions do you tend to ask yourself? Do you tend to ask yourself like questions like, what can I do better next time? Or like, I wasn't too happy with that. What can I do better next time? Rather than like getting into a fixed mindset. If it didn't go well, you might be like, oh, I'm just not good enough at this, or I'll have to wait another 3 or 4 months or whatever. So like just from that little dialogue there, you can see how it's very important to like ask yourself questions that will empower you and that will get you to practice more as well. So it's more about like what you want to get to is to see language as like a skill that isn't tied into your self-worth or who you think you are and stuff. Anybody can learn a language. It's a matter of what questions are you asking yourself? Where are you focusing your attention? And like, why do you want to learn the language? Get clear on those things and things will come together. So the growth mindset is about being more conscious about your questions and make sure you're asking questions that will help you to take action more and that you're actually enjoying the language too and you're enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah. The hard part for me, at least, when learning a new language and trying to speak it, is that I don't feel like myself. Right, I'm struggling so much to put the message out there, and now that I speak more and more English, obviously, and more Spanish, I feel like I have 3 different completely different personalities because of the way it evolves into the conversations that I started having. Does that happen to you?
Yeah, well, I realized, it was the with languages too, you won't have like an emotional attachment to words in the same way you do in your native language. So something as simple as like, for me, saying I love you in English feels very kind of like there's emotions there, but saying je t'aime in French doesn't have the exact same thing for me. So in a way, I see language as a way to like reinvent yourself. As in like if there's certain ways of expressing yourself that you feel very limited in your native language, just maybe the way you've grown up and the conditioning you've had, language is a great opportunity to like reinvent yourself a bit and start expressing yourself in a different way because you're starting with a language from scratch in terms of like emotions, like emotional attachments to words. So it's a great way to like express yourself differently and maybe even learn about some new topic through your new language. Like that can be difficult, but it's like having fun. If it's something you find fun and stuff, it can be a way to make it more engaging for yourself.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So the last one then as well is the associating it to something fun. So when it comes to, like you mentioned, 100 words there, that can be quite monotonous, learning a list of words that they're practical, so they are very useful. They have to be learned, but it can be very boring, like looking at a list of words. So what I did was I used a system called Anki, a flashcard system.
Yeah.
And I also listened to music. So I realized from my way of learning, I don't find memorizing words like very cognitively demanding. So I would listen to music. So what would happen is that I would start associating learning words as my time to listen to music that I liked listening to. So it made the task something I look forward to rather than something I was like, oh, do I have to do this? So as much as possible, start doing things that feel boring, start associating them with things you already like doing. So for me, it was music. Start finding ways to like incorporate the stuff that you need to do to become better at the language with something that like you find like, oh yeah, I actually want to do that anyway. I don't need to motivate myself to do that.
Yeah, I think it was Tim Ferriss who learned Japanese. Like he was in Japan and he didn't really want to learn it, but he had to because I think he was just a teenager back then, and he learned it through judo, martial arts.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I find that people that actually find learning more interesting do it exactly as you said, through something they actually love doing.
I think I learned some rugby terms in French too through I bought a PlayStation game of rugby, and
Mhm.
like I have all these words like hors-jeu and all that kind of like key terms and stuff. And I think I started playing a bit of rugby too when I was in France for a while. So yeah, you'll pick up the key terminology and stuff from doing that a lot quicker because it's experiential. Like.
Mhm. Yeah, and games now are completely immersive. When I learned through games, it was a very different era where text was very limited and definitely no voices. So nowadays, like if you play a rugby game, I'm sure there's like a bunch of sounds, a bunch of people talking, the commenters and other people saying things.
Gotcha. I
It's
think actually I had to buy it when I was in France. I had to buy the game there because I wouldn't have found it in Ireland with the commentary. It would have just been like basic stuff. But I think nowadays you wouldn't have any problem like getting a native game anywhere
mhm.
uh, where we are.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, they're pretty much the key tips that I would keep in mind learning a new language.
I love these. When I was traveling to Vietnam, I saw something I had never seen before, and the guy, so he was a teenager, and he was by far the best in the village. It was a very tiny village. He was the best at speaking English, and he brought us to his house. And when I got in, all I could see was post-it notes everywhere.
Yeah.
Basically, every single object in the house was labeled with the English term, so that he couldn't avoid it. He had no choice but to see the words, and he would change them up once in a while, and he would add new words on the fridge and things like that. So he was always forced to see the words in front of him. So I thought that was really a really great way to learn language as well.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think they say it's subconscious as well. You can kind of take that in as well, even if you're not paying attention.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's being creative with it, being creative and like having fun with it. They're the key things.
Yeah. Ajit, any questions? I know. So Ajit is very good in written English, and he's really afraid of speaking it. So I'm not sure, Dennis, if you have some suggestions on that, because he writes incredibly good. Uh, but he, I don't know. Maybe Ajit will write it, but
Yeah, could I help? Yeah, like I like starting off when I was learning French. I guess I would have considered myself very introverted and shy, and
mm,
so over time, as I just started taking more action and doing things and being okay with feeling uncomfortable, that over time it became less of a deal, but it does require to just kind of take more action on it and know kind of like where you want to start. Maybe a meetup isn't the first thing you want to do. Maybe it's like Skype or even audio or something. But confidence, yeah.
with yourself or with someone.
With someone like there's platforms on there online now. I think maybe Hello Lingo is Shared Talk. I think is gone, but Hello Lingo could be a place where they have it. Um, you can do video, or you can do a lot of times too. You can turn your camera off, and you can do audio. So maybe that would be the starting point. So if you don't want to go to a meetup and practice, start online and do like audio calls with people from these language platforms. That would be a good way to like get some practice. So like the only way I think you can get better at the language is to practice because it builds the muscle memory. Like you can do writing all the time, but like it's not going to be in your muscle memory. So what do you feel, Ajit? Though, like what do you think would be a good small step in the direction to speaking the language? Like, are you speaking at the moment in English at all, or are you doing small bits, or no? Okay. Have you tried like the platforms like Hello Lingo? Try the apps. Are they like conversational apps? Are they like Duolingo or
I wonder what's easier. Is it easier to practice with a native speaker or practice with a non-native speaker, you think?
I personally I prefer the native speakers because you can pick up habits from somebody who's not a native speaker. It's a
Mm.
personal preference, I guess, but again, I suppose my philosophy has always been like dive into the deep end so you don't have like a huge you just get it done with like you immerse yourself in it. Yeah, with pronunciation. Okay. I think with speaking at the same time, it's still it's the actual conversation. Like, I guess, what's your goal? Is it to speak to people? Is it to use it for your job, or like? So it's to speak to people.
I personally find pronunciation to not be that big of a deal. I make mistakes all the time, and especially in Spanish, I make mistakes all the time, and people have all different accents all over the world. So your mistake is actually someone's right way of pronouncing it.
I think with confidence, I don't think pronunciation. I think that makes it worse than the confidence. You can start kind of second guessing yourself a bit more, and I think with confidence with the speaking, the best thing to do is to go out, speak to people, and make mistakes. In the moment, it's not going to feel good to begin with, but you get used to it, and then that's when you're going to get really good at the language, because you'll be like practicing. You'll get the instant feedback, and that's kind of the only way I know how to do it. But I would suggest like small steps if you want to do that, and I would start with like look online for like conversational sites. I'm pretty sure Hello Lingo is a platform where you can definitely do instant messaging, and then you can do audio and video. So have you done instant messaging, Ajit, in English with people? I'm guessing you have. No? Okay. If you haven't done...
very surprised that Ajit's English, written English, is just so incredible that I'm really surprised that but it's really a confidence thing, and I know I've been there. It's been difficult for me as well.
Yeah, no, I've been there too. It's and I guess the other thing too is that like those feelings never fully go away either. Like when I do meet somebody, especially in Spanish and Italian, we don't have to speak to them because I don't practice it an awful lot nowadays compared to before. I do get nervous and kind of stuff. There's still feelings of like imposter syndrome and I'm not good enough. But over time, I've learned to kind of just ignore that and just pay attention to the person I'm speaking to. Because like, yeah, it's kind of when you start like paying more attention to that, you generally will start finding people who will help you more and stuff. So a lot of language learning too is like being able to like practice more and then eventually start finding people who will help you and encourage you, and that builds your confidence. But you're not going to find those people until you like start speaking to them more. Does that help, Ajit? Or cool, no problem. Yes, I think the language platforms. I can put a link in it there. I can put a link in the chat there. Hello Lingo.
Yeah, I can put the link in the video description on YouTube as well. I actually didn't know about it. I used to use a thing called I think it's language-exchange.com. It's basically an in-person meetup where you. So I was in Spain and they wanted to learn English. I wanted to learn Spanish. So basically, you just arrange. It's just a communication platform where you arrange a place where you meet and have conversations. It's cool. It's cool. I did it probably 5 times.
Actually, I think that's what I was doing as well when I was learning Spanish and Italian. The odd time I would use Skype with somebody to speak to them in Italian or Spanish or something. So,
but you said Skype though, right?
I don't know. I think sometimes actually you'll instant message somebody and you can share Skype details. So that's what can often happen too. If there's no like chat functionality within the platform, if you're having a conversation with someone, you find that if you kind of connect a bit, you can say like, I want to practice my spoken. Are you okay with like doing Skype or whatever? And you can share Skype IDs. So there's always ways around this kind of stuff. So I think if you're not used to speaking to people, that's probably the best place before you go to a meetup in person with people, if you don't feel like you're ready for that.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed it though, the in-person meeting, because it was both people struggling at the same time over a lunch or coffee or things like that. I don't know. There's something magical about both struggling on the same topics but in different language.
Well, I think that's it. Maybe it's it's speaking with a native speaker who's also trying to learn your language. So there's like mutual respect there. You both know the struggle, and it's kind of like you're both helping each other out. I think that's the ideal situation, learning from somebody who's learning your language. so that you can help each other out.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to check it out. Hello Lingo.
Yeah, I think it was quite good. Yeah.
Nice. I wanted to use a thing called Baseline. I'm not sure if it only works in Spanish, but it's basically you pay a monthly fee, and it's pretty expensive. It's like, I think it's $200, but you get access to teachers, any teacher you want. It's a buffet. You just pick the teacher you want, and she's going to be available for you for as long as you want her to be during that month.
Oh, that actually sounds quite cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it sounds expensive, like $200 a month, but if you really use it, it's like cheap. It's really cheap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you've committed to it, like, yeah, you're going to do it every day for the month.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Anything else to add?
I guess actually it's consistency is key. So do 10 minutes a day of language learning rather than 2 hours once a week. That's a key thing to keep in mind, and to just persevere and just know why you're doing it. Get clear on that, and things will come together as long as you persist and just experiment and try things out.
Absolutely. I second that, and not just for learning languages, but for pretty much anything in life. Persistence. I used to not be persistent at all in anything. I used to start projects and just give up, and obviously that led nowhere. And one of the reasons I've thrived in the past 2 or 3 years was exactly that, just consistency and accepting that things are not going to go well to start with. But if I keep at it and I keep improving, then things will be right. And that's how I started speaking proper Spanish. So
that's it. Yeah, perfect.
All right, guys. This was SkillUp Academy, and today's training session we had Denis show us his 5 favorite hacks on how to learn language. I second everything that he says. The 80-20, the growth mindset, the keeping it simple, accepting that you're going to have a hard time and you got to keep practicing. These are all incredible tips. So thanks, Denis, for the session.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on. Best of luck with everything as well. I like what you're doing here at Skill Academy. So keep it going.
Yeah, thanks. All right, guys. We'll see you in the next training session. I don't know where it's going to be yet, so stay tuned on skillupacademy.com.